Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. This is a podcast for your personal evolution. In this episode, the C.I.A. model to get us to move. Would you like to be better at getting yourself to move? You have an overall desire, but find yourself struggling to take the first step, just get going. I think we all do in certain areas of our lives at certain times. And from what I experience, I feel like it's getting worse culturally. So I brought on an expert, and we're going to exaggerate the point to help us better conceptualize what's happening when we don't move and make progress, and some different ways to understand going about it. So Michele Rigby Assad, she was a normal person like everyone else, but through some circumstances you're about to hear of, she became a legit CIA operative, spent a decade working in the Middle East. She took part in the high stakes missions you would expect from working in the CIA, where your life or others' lives are literally on the line. The place of danger that they referred to is the X, and their training was no matter what to be able to get off the X. Michele has outlined these concepts, along with some intriguing stories, as you can imagine, in a new book titled Get Off the X, CIA Secrets for Conquering Obstacles and Achieving Your Life's Mission. With this conversation, we don't spend time talking about the stories of the CIA. If you want that, get her book. Or she says, watch the movie, or the series, I guess it is, Homeland, or a new one that's called The Agency that I've seen. Really like it. But we talk about how the concepts of getting off the X relate to all of us. Our lives. We live lives that we feel often are high stakes for us, and we need to move, progress, get off the X's that we're stuck in. I found Michele's guidance helping me not to feel like I needed more motivation or inspiration or some Mission Impossible song to get me going. I just needed to have some pragmatic tools and better perspectives to employ. If you want to hone in on not only how to get off the X, but maybe what your X is, connect with me. Let's find you some guidance, some personal guidance. You can find me at kevinmiller.co or email me at kmiller@kevinmiller.co. All right, coming up next, I am with Michele Rigby Assad talking about how to get off your X. Let's evolve ourselves. Michele, when I got the book across my desk, CIA, get off the X. It looks pretty interesting. And I have no personal background in anything remotely into that, but I realize that I appreciate stories, whether it's books or movies or whatnot, because of I really think of like the definiteness of purpose that you've got to have in a job like that. Okay. I see you smiling. That's gotta be, to me, it's gotta be fulfilling. And as your book talks about, it requires a major focus. Fair?
That is very fair. Yes. It is such a fulfilling job. I'm just one of those people that I came out of the womb needing purpose. And so this fills, that job really filled me. And I'm one of those people that always needs to know where I'm marching, why I'm marching that direction, and who I'm helping in the process. So given all that, being in the CIA was, and stopping terrorist attacks from occurring and finding the bad guys and stopping the car bomb before it explodes, that was such a tangible way to feel like you're making a difference and keeping people safe.
Okay, so I'm going to ask some questions just out of my curiosity with it, and go a couple directions before we get into the issue of the book, really. And one is, so I've been a lifetime entrepreneur, and real aware that a lot of people stereotype what an entrepreneur is, right? As somebody who's risk takers and maybe extroverted and assertive and whatnot. And I tend to fit that somewhat, yet in my history with being an entrepreneur, have realized, and a lot of the best entrepreneurs I know do not fit that mold at all. It's not a personality type. We're just the ones that are out here talking about it. So you hear from us. Okay. So take that into the CIA. And is it fair to say, obviously the CIA has, roles in a zillion different roles, but in yours, where you're actually, can I just say, in the field, in essence,
Yeah.
Is that, and I was thinking about it as I read your book, is there some aspect where you say, yeah, it kind of gears towards a certain personality type, or do you say, no, it spans across most?
Um, it gears towards deeply curious people,
Hmm.
um, people who are extremely interested in other cultures because you're operating in a foreign culture and you're doing very dangerous things. So you're breaking the laws of another country, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
In order to do the things that you have to do. So you have to be proficient in other cultures, and the only way to become culturally proficient is to spend a lot of time in those
Yeah.
places. So you have people with like a real sense of adventure, like you want to do things that are different. So I think that's probably what is the common thread amongst people in the C.I.A. Even though, of course, we have so many different jobs, so many different things within that umbrella. But if you're in the field very specifically, then you're a person who likes to take risk and who are fascinated by people and can operate in strange or difficult and different places.
Okay. Fair enough. Looking at this topic of getting off the X, I in going through the book, I kind of wanted to summarize, and I want to see if you feel like it's fair. If this was the impetus and the objective here was to get us, all of us, to get us in essence to take action, to move from where, and I wrote a list here, from where it may feel dangerous or we may be stagnant or toxic or depressed or things just aren't working or we're in apathy or whatever the X is. It can come in a lot of different forms. And your impetus with this book is to help us move. Is that too simplistic?
That is not too simplistic. That is it. It's
Okay.
all about generating some kind of forward momentum.
Okay. Let me play with that then, because with that, it's, this is C.I.A. So the forward momentum may not be whipping out a gun. It could be hitting the floor to meditate or to stop and consider or to get some counsel or to pursue a resource. It's just to do something. I felt like you did a really good job of not saying how or what it is this is defined by this. You go out and you kick ass and you whatever. It's going to come in different forms and formats. Fair.
Absolutely. Everybody's got a different circumstance that lands them on the X of life. And then we know that could be 5,000 different things can get you stuck or can make you feel like you can't move forward in your life. And then you've got your different personalities and different ways of approaching an obstacle. And so there is no right way to do it. But I think the problem in our own minds is there's two major problems. One is we think we have to do the next best perfect thing. And so
Mm-hmm.
the enemy of perfection is, you've got to be willing to make mistakes, to go out and gather information in order to find your path and purpose. The other thing is it just requires, and this as an entrepreneur, extra energy to do something different. So human beings, we are wired for efficiency. And that has kept us going. But the opposite, the problem with that is that we're so wired for efficiency that we become stagnant. We forget to challenge ourselves, or we're scared to make a move. Like, what if it fails? We have all these reasons why we kind of shake hands with average. And we don't want to be average, and we don't want to sit in our anxiety and our fear. We want to like get out and do stuff. So that's what I'm trying to get people to understand is it takes extra energy and it takes a willingness to risk making a mistake or not, you're doing something wrong. But in the process of doing that, you'll get to where you need to be.
Okay. Okay. Let me play with another analogy then. I'm curious about. I was a pro cyclist, and I remember fairly early in my career, I was in a race, and I remember a guy that I was kind of marking because he was just one of the superstars, and I just found myself auditing him somewhat. And so it's cycling. So what do you think of? It's the strongest guy, right? Biggest lungs, biggest quads, whatever. And I'm watching this guy, and it dawned on me. I'll never forget it. This guy is the best conservation artist I have ever seen. The guy is putting out like 30% less energy than everyone. I just dawned, I just watched a son of a gun. And at the end, then he just destroys us and we're out here wasting energy. Okay. So kind of like a myth is what I'm playing with. And I'm wondering about that we look at, okay, CIA, look at what you're doing and going, okay, you got to be this, superhuman killer, whatever. And as I read your book, I thought it feels like what you've done is become an expert in moving and taking action, but also in just making a decision.
Right. And, it's such an interesting process to tell people like, no, it's not, we're not doing things we're not shooting. We're not out there fighting. We're not karate chopping people. In fact, that's like the opposite of what we do. We're very quiet and we move smoothly. And what it is it's a game of psychology. So in my job, the way that I became better than someone else or better than my colleagues is I was willing to sit with the question longer. So I was willing to entertain the problem, which was not easy because we were so busy. But I realized one day, like, if I don't sit in this problem and try to figure it out, I could be disseminating false and fabricated information. And when we do that, our troops roll off a military base to action our CIA intelligence, and then they get shot at, and then they lose limbs, and then they lose lives.
Yeah.
So I realized that the key to my success wasn't necessarily, Kevin, it wasn't like I was the smartest person in the room. In fact, I definitely wasn't. But I was willing to entertain the difficulty of figuring out a hard case. When something didn't feel right, I didn't just ignore it. I like marinated in the struggle. And that's what I think made me really good at my job.
Okay. And I was about to relate that to chess, but hold on a second, because I'm reading a book and I have not asked the author to be on the show yet, just because I haven't gotten around to it, but it's called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. It's been around for a while.
Oh, she's good.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating it. I just haven't gotten that far in the book because I've got another project and it's helped me a little bit. But I like the idea that she kind of showcases that poker versus chess. And in chess, you can analyze it. Everything is on the board. There is nothing hidden. And you could theoretically wait long enough and figure out the perfect move. She said in poker, you never can, because at some point you just can't know what's out there. And as I hear you, because you said you're willing to sit with the question longer. I'm thinking, okay, it's like a chess game and you're waiting. But then I thought, no, but it's got to be like poker, because at some point you can never know everything and make the perfect decision.
It's true. You have to take the limited information at your disposal and say, this may all be anecdotal, but what does this anecdotal information or behavior, what is that telling me? And so actually really am very good at putting together little bits of information to put together a larger picture. In other words, you have to do that very quickly and efficiently, because in the CIA, if you got to the point where you can confirm something like that, then it's no longer intelligence. So you're trying to find, how do these little pieces of the puzzle fit together? How does that source's behavior in that room, what is that behavior telling me about whether he is legit or whether he is lying to me and he's not really a member of Al-Qaeda or any terrorist group? So there was limited information, but at the same time, so much information coming at you. Because if you think about a personal meeting with someone, which I'm sure as an entrepreneur you have to have in business all the time, and what you're doing in those meetings is your brain is a supercomputer and you are processing so much data from the person, how they're holding themselves, how they're interacting with you, what they're saying, what they're not saying, which sometimes is the most important thing, what's not coming out of their mouth, and whether they're looking you in the eye, whether they can't look you in the eye. So it's an interesting, on one hand, limited data, on the other hand, a ton of data.
Gosh, it is. I'm sitting here thinking about Dale Carnegie's old, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it feels like that's your job. I mean, your job is you have to be there and engage. You have to be a participant. You've got to have something to say, something to offer. And you have to likewise be fully engaged in auditing the other person. And we don't do that as humans. We're just thinking about ourselves. I mean, that's our habit. So you've got to be very unnatural in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and you talked about focus earlier. It requires such extreme focus when you're doing that, because also as you're assessing that individual that you're meeting with, you are then changing your own behavior to reflect what you think they need. Okay, so for example, some of my colleagues would just get into this rote idea. I'm meeting with another source. Today is another source meeting. Well, the source that has a PhD and teaches classes at the university is going to be very different than the source who's a mid-level insurgent, the guy who breaks people's legs and you know so the way that you have to assess those people when you're in the room with them, and you think, okay, based on the language they're using, based on their background and their education I'm going to act very differently with the PhD than I'm going to act with like Abu Muhammad who cracks skulls. And so you're assessing them, but you're also then changing the way that you're interacting with them so that you can appeal to them. I might call the PhD ya doctor, or doctor, which is in Arabic. They like that because you are honoring that they're very well educated. And then I'm going to call the mid-level insurgent, I'm going to refer to him as brother, because it's like street. And it's such I think, super fascinating process how you change how you interact with them based on who they are.
Do you still feel like you in that process? You're enacting, but you're still authentic. You're still you, but you are engaging differently.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. It's still me. And I still felt very authentic, because I wasn't hiding or manipulating in a bad way. I was just trying to make a connection with people who are very different. So, yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to be. Let me see. I'm going to try to be tactful here. I mean, the CIA. So I looked it up. Central Intelligence Agency, the primary foreign intelligence service of the United States government. Okay, so I'm reading the book and I'm thinking about America, right? I grew up as a kid, and you're singing the saying the Pledge of Allegiance and whatnot. And America, we're land of the free, home of the brave. And yet, as I read your book, I feel a desire that you would, I'm assuming, I'm going to ask, to come out, because it doesn't feel, if we look at the culture right now, if we look at the headlines, if we look at social media, if we look at the mental health aspects of America right now, doesn't feel like people are feeling very free or acting very brave. Thoughts?
I think we are less brave than we used to be. And I think that it's a generational shift due to social media and the flood of anxiety that has produced. So I do think we are a lot less brave, which is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate to get these concepts out the door, especially to the 20s and 30 somethings. In terms of free, I guess, it all depends on what you're comparing to. In some ways, we're fighting to maintain our freedoms, but also I've traveled in parts of the world where I really do know what it's like not to be free at all. Yeah, so I've seen the worst case scenarios, very well aware what that looks like and very conscious. I hear people talking about the United States today, and I'm like, have you ever traveled abroad? I mean, have you ever been to a foreign country? Because of course we have problems, but wait till you see over there. So I guess I just have a really deep appreciation of what's good here, as well as where we are challenged.
I appreciate that. I mean, I lived in Holland, or Netherlands is what they call it now. I lived there, and as a long time ago, racing bikes. And I mean, that's just, it's a civilized country. They got everything kind of similar. And I felt like, oh my gosh, we are so spoiled over here. Talk about freedom. We get anything we want when we want, especially even more so now, all these years later, that we are free. But I think that's my thought. I feel so free, and yet it's not the vernacular that I hear out there. I hear
have to be careful, because when you're so correct, As an intel officer, I can actually see online the manipulations of Chinese and Russians and kids in the basement putting out certain messages about our culture. And I can see that they're influence operations. And they are everywhere,
Hmm.
including the Chinese and other nations, paying Harvard, uh, investing in Harvard, and then they're really changing the narrative of what's going on there. So we're inundated with these negative messages, and a lot of times, as a former intelligence officer, I can see that this is an influence operation right in front of our faces.
Yeah. That's another show. I've got a friend in cybersecurity, and to hear him talk, like, oh my gosh, it feels overwhelming.
Yeah,
To
it
see
is.
how we are influenced and to wonder what the heck is actually true. All right.
Yes.
Your book, though, the X. So you defined it right off the bat. The X stands for the location targeted by enemies as they launch their attack. This is the place of our greatest vulnerability. So a minute ago, I kind of rattled off a list, and I don't need to do it again, but to look at that and go, myself and anyone who's listening, I mean, if we're just perfect, then we're perfect. You don't need to listen to the show and go do something else. If you've got any area of vulnerability, any frustration, any apathy, any depression, any anger, any stagnation, anything that you feel not completely, satisfied or fulfilled in, that's what you're talking about here. The X. Here's this thing. How do we get off it? And I like this statement you made. You said, well, it's hard to leave the comfort zone. It's even more dangerous to stay there. I think that's what's helped me, because I'm like everybody else, Michelle, and I look at, okay, I'm thinking about doing this and it's risky. Well, and I have to come back and go, well, I wouldn't be looking at that if I wasn't somewhat dissatisfied with where I'm at right now. And am I okay? That's been the best help for me. Am I okay not changing, staying right here where I am in this, whatever state of vulnerability? Am I okay being here in a month, in a year? How about 2 years? Almost always, not always, but almost always, the answer is no, I'm not okay being here. Well, that makes the risk feel a lot less. Now, once in a while, I have realized, no, I got to admit, I'm okay. All right, well, take that off the list for now, because you're probably not going to have motivation enough. But so step one here, you're saying, and I like that you pulled out fight, flight, or freeze, and that the effort here, at least, is just don't freeze.
Right. So
Do something.
I tell people the most important thing is to realize when you are stuck or stagnating. So there's a lot of people who just float through life and never ask that question. And of course, you're a person who has really won well in life. And so you're used to checking in, like, am I happy? Is everything okay? Am I good? Do I need to do something else? I do that constantly. I mean, almost on a daily basis, which might sound ridiculous to people. But when I look around me, I can see a lot of my friends who've been stuck for years or even decades, who never ask the question, am I stuck? And so the first thing is to recognize, I mean, this is, when it's really hard to get up Monday morning and you don't know why you're going to work, or you don't know why you're in this relationship and it's no longer serving you and it's toxic, or you don't know why you are staying on this career path, which leaves you so unfulfilled that you lost all motivation in life. And then there's crazy things that get us stuck, like stuff that we have no control over, like the death of a loved one, or a
Yeah.
disease, or a sickness, or COVID, or things that come in from left field. And then you're suddenly in a club that you never wanted to join. And so you say to yourself, okay, well, I'm here, I'm stuck, or I'm in a bad place. How do I get myself moving? So for me, it's understanding if you are stuck. And number two, what's got you there? Why are you not moving forward? And like,
Mm-hmm.
as you mentioned, fear, uncertainty, intimidation, memory of defeat. That's another biggie. I've tried before and it didn't work, so I'll just sit here. So once you have identified what the problem is, then you can challenge it. Then you can start planning to push yourself off that X.
Well, so let me ask, this continues to overlap in my head as I talk about different topics that this is personal development, personal evolution. That's the point of the show. And so as we look at all these issues, and in this one, this aspect of being stuck and being, courageous enough to move, in essence, I feel like we have this human propensity to kind of label and fix and to say, okay, I am brave. Yeah, I am somebody who moves. I get off the X. And I'm thinking about that as I read the book, and I thought, if I took the key areas of life, there are some areas. Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm it. I get off the X. And then some other areas where I don't get off the X so well. And having to look at that, and I feel like I've limited myself in that, Michele. I think thinking about, okay, I'm that kind of person who does X. And so if it has something to do with physicality, man, I'm there. Has to do with, money or work, to some aspects, I'm there. How about, talking about vulnerability? How about emotional vulnerability? Nope. Apparently. History has shown, now I'm working on it like mad, but history has shown that no, but I thought I was that risk taker. I thought I was that, and then had like a primary area of my life, realized, oh, totally missed that one, buddy. And it's sobering, I guess. It helps me to be sober, to go, okay, it's not just an across the board thing. And I assume in your own life, you look at some areas, and this is easier for you in some than others. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, I didn't write this book because I am the best person at conquering my fears. I have struggled with intimidation my entire life. Like that thing for me, fear and intimidation, have made me limit myself over and over and over again. Except that I decided early on that I wasn't going to let it stop me from doing interesting things. So the reason why I wrote this book is because I have become a master at pushing myself off the X, because I was so overwhelmed with intimidation. I mean, I'm from a small town, and I was very cognizant that I don't know much about the world. And my parents weren't sophisticated. They didn't teach me about foreign cultures. Kevin, I knew nothing, zero, less than zero. And then so to go for a place of, that kind of background to, of all freaking places in the world, the CIA, to do counterterrorism work in the Arab world, I had to learn everything from scratch. So what it meant was, man, it's really intimidating as an 18-year-old to travel to Egypt a few days after graduation, but I did it, and I volunteered in an orphanage for a month. And boy, was it intimidating to apply to Georgetown because I thought I wasn't smart enough for an Ivy League school. And I got in. And boy, is it intimidating applying to the CIA or going through CIA training for a year where people are getting cut left and right and thinking, I'm not CIA material. You know what? I'm still going to push through. I don't know what I'm capable of, but despite my fear and uncertainty and intimidation, I'm going to do it anyway. And then I get through CIA training with flying colors. So what I realized at the end of the day was my brain lies to me all the time. And if I let it limit me, man, I wouldn't do anything interesting. And so because, now you look at my resume and you think, well, you were just always a natural, you were always a natural getting off the X, which not at all. It was the opposite of that. So I just point to myself as exhibit A. Like if I can do it, then I feel like anybody can do it. Learn to do it.
Okay. I got a question I'm really curious about, but I got an off tangent one that I'm going to throw in here just because I'm going to take advantage of having you here. This is like one of those questions your kids ask about something. You go, I don't know. I have no idea. What if one of my kids, I got a bunch of kids, and one of them, tonight I'll be talking about this. So guys, I did this show with this woman named Michele, and get off the CIA. And one of them says, dude, how do you join the CIA? That's such a basic question, but I have no idea. Call Michele. Can I get your number? I mean, literally, do you just go to the CIA website and hit an application like a resume? Really? That's just exactly so weird.
How it happens. I personally think we should be doing it differently. I think the CIA should be strategically going out and finding the people they need and hiring them. The way I got in was they recruit from all the local universities in the DC area. So they came to Georgetown and they did an information session at the School of Foreign Service. And so I went to that information session, and certainly did not think I was CIA material, but I put my resume into that box because it was a physical box back then. And there were
Mhm.
like all these hundreds of resumes in that box. And then I was really shocked to get a call 3 weeks later from the CIA recruiter saying, we're interested in you. And I was like, really? Are you kidding me right now? And that started out a very long process because, as you can imagine, you have to get vetted. Are
Mhm.
you the kind of person we're looking for? Can you handle stress? Are you trainable? Are you a patriot? Do you have integrity? Can you communicate well? Like, can you handle, again, maybe I already said this, huge amounts of stress?
Mhm.
Can you operate well with a team, but also operate very proficiently as a sole operator on your own? So, it's a long process. And then if you make it through all of that vetting process and the polygraph and the background investigation, and they like you, then you get offered a position. But then you have to then go through a year of training, tradecraft training, in which you also get weeded out those who can't perform during that year. So,
Okay, here's an interesting question then, because I'm sitting here thinking about my kids, and that's an easy one. Somebody could think, okay, you're a kid, you're in high school or college, whatever, go join the CIA. I'm also realizing there's so many guys my age that have kind of, kids are out of the house, they've kind of made money and they're bored looking at retirement. And I'm thinking, can't you just join the CIA? I mean, they need resources, right? Can you join the CIA at 50s?
I think we should rethink that because the current rule is you have to be under 35 to train as an operative, like
Well, there you go.
field operative. But I don't know that that's the best rule.
This
Yeah, because there's a lot of us over 50 that are pretty awesome, right?
I'm
So
thinking, man, you figured out a lot. You've figured out how to deal with stress. You've learned a lot. You got a lot of wisdom. Yeah,
yeah,
well, so
seriously,
you
I
can
think
put
you
that vote
should
in for the
your
CIA.
training.
Well, here's my question on you talking about being intimidated. That is it fair to say that you have not just vanquished intimidation, that it still exists in you,
Yeah.
and it may still be? This is what I was playing with. It's a concept that I've thought about a couple times recently. Actually, I thought about it with a client that I have, but I thought about it again reading your book. Or you said you become a master of getting off the X. Now you're saying, yeah, but you still have intimidation in you. So is it still something that you still have discomfort in essence with feeling intimidated, but you've gotten familiar with getting off the X anyway? So there's still discomfort, but you've made it familiar. You made the discomfort familiar. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's very fair. I would say that the level of stress associated with that intimidation is far less than it used to be. Now it's just kind of like maybe a voice that comes up. Are you sure you can do that? Where
Yeah.
before it was like a giant monster in your head. So the intimidation factor, I would say, has decreased. But, all the time, Kevin, I'll say, I mean, you served in the CIA for 10 years. You really don't think you can do that thing over there? Like,
Yeah.
um, I just remind myself of all of the successes that I've had in my life. So it makes the intimidation monster go away pretty quick.
You have a quote in the book on getting off the X. It's something to the effect of the swifter your response, the better. Now, of course, you're telling stories in the book that are like what we see in the movies. And yeah, you got to make a response. It just struck a chord with me though, because I'm invariably, watching a movie with a family or something like that. And it's some, spy thriller or whatever, or something, where there's something pretty bad's happening. And there's always the pause. I'm sure they do it for dramatic effect. And you're sitting there going, holy crap, go run, just run. Something's bad coming and you're just sitting there. But I thought about that in getting literal with life, that how often are we in a place? So maybe it's not life or death. There's not a nuclear warhead or a Tyrannosaurus Rex or whatever, a gunman or a gun person or whatever. But we're still sitting there in that place, not getting off. And I think I worry that we're making it worse. Kind of like when
Yeah.
when you're in that job you hate and you just stay there and kind of languish, ultimately something happens. You get laid off or whatever. Now you got to find something fast and you can't. How
Right.
much better if you'd had time and done this on the side before it got critical and acute? And I felt like you spoke to that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, totally. Like, I can't tell you how many people tried to talk us out of leaving the CIA after 10 years, which we were exhausted because it was like 5 overseas tours, which is a lot. And it was all in the shadow of 9/11. So we were sent to really hard places. And they said, yeah, but you won't get that good government pension. And so I was thinking to myself, really? So you're telling us not to get off the X because of a government pension? Kevin, if I would have followed that, I would have been 10 years and more misery because CIA is not like the nicest place to serve. There's good people there, but it can be a very toxic environment. Um, and now on the outside, we took such a risk at starting our own company. But that company's now been going for 13 years, and we have made so much more than a government pension would have ever produced. Like,
Yeah.
we would have had the most, I'm sure we would have done a great job in the CIA, but what we've been able to do outside the CIA thing has been incredible. So you realize, the longer you wait, the longer you freeze in place, the harder it is to get off the X, the harder it is to move.
Okay, a big point on that. Looking at I'm going to pull out another quote from the book. You said, "Consider the possibility that the most difficult obstacles aren't the circumstances themselves, but how we respond to them." Okay, that's a somewhat, I want to say, people have heard that before, but we don't abide by it. And I'm continually enamored with that of looking, and I need to be fair. The circumstances, do they matter? Well, sure. I mean, if it's something bad, like you said, if it's a death of a loved one or a house fire, whatever, make it up. Does the circumstance matter? Yeah, of course. Sure. Usually. But what I am continuing to come to is the meaning that we make about it and go forward with seems to matter so much more. So I don't want to devalue the circumstance. I think that feels hard for everybody because the circumstance, they felt it was an emotion, but I felt you aligning with that concept but it's the meaning that we make up that we are kind of making up. It's, we're doomed or we're going to be fine. Well, which is it?
Yeah.
It can be both.
What you say in your head in the darkest of moments, it will shape how you come out of that event. And so I've been through some really tough things in my life. And I recognize that I could either face these really awful things in darkness or in light. So am I going to crawl up? And there's moments you crawl up into the fetal position. You say, I just need to survive this day. Or am I going to allow some hope to creep in, or I'm going to insert some hope, or I'm going to read some stories that help me to have some hope that I can come out of this darkness. That hope is really essential. And my friend that I included, because of course, as you saw, I have these amazing stories of people in this book who have gotten off the worst axes of life. I mean, he was taken as a human shield, an American businessman, kidnapped in Kuwait. He was supposed to leave Kuwait just a few hours later, and he was kidnapped when Saddam's troops rolled in during the first Gulf War and took over the country of Kuwait, and then was taken hostage with about 100 other international businessmen from the UK and Australia and Germany and Japan and America. And then, as he was talking about me, they didn't know how long they were going to be held as these human shields at these critical infrastructure sites in Iraq. And so I think the worst part is you don't know how long this set of circumstances is going to last. And in fact, it's highly likely you're going to die. Highly likely. And this is the kinds of things that people faced in concentration camps.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get any darker than that. That's the worst. And he told me, and I just was so impressed with him. He said, I realized that I had no agency over my circumstances. I have no influence over what food I eat, where I sleep, they take me. I am a prisoner of Saddam's, but I always have agency over my brain. Yeah. And he made the decision to say, you cannot hold me hostage in my head. I am going to move forward in hope every day that somehow we will survive this. And I thought, well, I don't know if I could have done that, but he did. And he said, the hostages that curled up into a fetal position every single day, they got sick. They almost didn't survive. And those that said, I have to get my head into the right space, they were the ones that were healthier and they did better and they helped other people through it. And of course, at the end of the day, thank God they survived and they were returned back to their countries.
Yeah.
But I think that for me, I think to myself, well, you're not in a concentration camp. So whatever it is you're dealing with, um, we have to be grateful for that which we have. And that's how we find the light to move forward.
Michelle, I appreciate the analogy. I'm, of course, it makes me think of Viktor Frankl in Man's
Yeah.
Search for Meaning. But what
Yes.
you just said about the fetal position, that's one of the things in the book that always stuck with me when he said, kind of like your friend, he said, I could look around at the other prisoners and I could tell you who was going to make it and who wasn't just by that. And I thought, I'm not in concentration camp, but I'm in life. Could I, somebody, if I'm being videotaped, can you see the telltale signs of, oh yeah, that's a guy who's going to have this problem. Oh, yep. That's probably going to have that problem. What are the things that I'm doing that are giving that off? And in this sense, looking at circumstances, and am I the kind of person who, I used to like the MacGyver show, and he, some terrible thing, and he's got a pocket knife and a piece of leather and some beef jerky. And he makes a bomb, or whatever. But he's so optimistic. But I'm thinking, okay, well, what's the other option? Just go,
Yeah.
well, I'm screwed. Man, I feel like that's a benefit that you have having. Now, you weren't in a concentration camp, but even being in those situations that were, literal, it's life or death. I mean, it's big things are going to happen here. That if we could take that back to our lives, and I do have to, again, I don't want to minimize things, even in my own life, but to say it's not life or death. I'm sitting here kind of feeling like I'm about to die, but I'm not. My life is not threatened. It could be a difficult circumstance, but get some perspective. I mean, we've
Yeah.
got to do that. Okay.
Perspective, gratitude, humility, and
Yeah.
just searching for the positive. So when I went through this incredibly, my husband and I went through a really dark time, a terrible situation we were facing, lasted like 3 years. So it was extremely long time to wonder how you're going to get from hour to hour of the day. But I would carry around like a Bible verse that someone had written out for me. I ended up meant so much to me that I framed it. And I'm telling you, Kevin, I told myself, if you literally have to clutch that in your hand and you walk around the house all day with that clutched in your hand, and when you think you can't breathe, you read it again, sometimes that's what it takes. Like whatever is that thing that will give you hope and will
Yeah.
give you some light, you have to do everything you can to focus on it. Come hell or high water, you're going to hang on to that thing. And it's hard. There is nothing easy about that. Nothing. But we have to, for our survival and our futures, we have to find a way to do that.
Okay, it gave me a really good idea for a client right now. I'm taking notes. Thank you. I'll send you some cash. But just that it is that. I mean, again, talking about the movies, it's that consummate thing. Somebody's in prison or prison concentration camp, and they've squirreled away that little picture,
Yeah.
of the kid, the spouse, the whatever. That how often do we not? I mean, I say this for a client, even for myself. Am I daily staying clear on what matters?
Yeah.
On my gosh, my book is called What Drives You. Am I staying clear on what is my drive? What am I? I think so often we don't know. Okay. Which brings me to also, I mean, obviously there's people who have no idea they're on the X, that they're in a bad spot. Honestly, I hope that that's not many of the people that are listening to this podcast right now. I think most people are here because they're somewhat aware. They're more aware than the masses, and
Yeah.
they're here, and they're the kind of people that are going to get and read your book. So, but with it, they feel like something's there, but they don't know what it is. And you talk about that specifically in the book. They are unclear. They can feel that something's wrong, but they just don't know what it is. And they really don't know where to turn anymore. So help us there.
Yeah, I love that question because what it feels like you're like in a dark room and it's so dark you can't even see your hand in front of your face and you're trying to find that thing and you're like, I don't know where to go. So that I likened to my 20s when I was trying to figure out what in God's name was I supposed to be doing with a career. I mean, I graduated college, and then what? So, you know what I tell people? And what worked for me when I look back on my life, and I can say during those periods of time when I had absolutely no clue, what I did was I said, well, what am I really passionate about? Or is there something deep inside my gut that's telling me something I need to focus on? And for me, it was study the Middle East, study the Middle East. And I couldn't tell you why. I mean, I started out, my first overseas trip was to do a volunteer work project in an orphanage in Egypt for a month. So that kind of opened my mind up to the entire world. Because, of course, back in 1991, we all didn't know much about the world. There was no internet. You didn't know about the place you were going to before you went. There was no telephone. There were no iPads. You just went. But I had this instinct. So I could say dig deep to figure out if you have an instinct and to not ignore it. So the instinct for me was get abroad, study the Middle East. And so I don't care if you're broke, because I was broke. So what I did was I just scrounged enough. I bought a workbook and cassette tapes, and I started teaching myself how to write in Arabic. And then I saved enough money that I started taking Arabic classes at night because I was working during the day. So I took Arabic classes at night. And so I'm like, I still don't know what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And I talked to hundreds of people trying to figure out some clue to my future. So I would say, like, your job, if you are in the dark room and you can't see the light, is to look for your own instinct. Is there something deep inside telling you a general direction? The other thing is act like an intelligence officer. You are combing the world to figure out. I asked everyone about their jobs. Do you like your career? Do you hate your career? What's good about it? What did you study? You know, blah, blah, blah. I queried people left and right. And I'd say, I wonder if I should do that for a career. And then in my gut, I'd say, no, that's not it. I'd ask that person about their career. And I'd say, oh, you know what? I'm not very good at that. That's not it. So what it is you're just constantly moving, not necessarily to the perfect place, but you're moving to explore your world. In the process of that is what got me into Georgetown to study contemporary Arab studies. It was a master's degree program in contemporary Arab studies. And that was 1998. And my parents said, like, what in God's name are you going to do with a master's degree in Arab studies? Well, the most fascinating thing about this, and that's why I always tell people, listen to your gut. On September 10th of 2001, that meant nothing to no one. And on September 11th, that became the most sought after skill set in the world.
Wow.
Now I mean, I always say, like, you don't know what's around the corner. God knows what's around the corner. So don't ignore that deep, deep sense of, even if it's a very general sense of direction, because as you start moving, little by little, it'll be revealed to you where you're, and then you'll suddenly, a door will open, you'll be like, wow, I made it. Like,
I appreciate that. And I remember that moment as well, but I love the story of it. You know, you, on this aspect, so you actually segment people or give categories that I really appreciated. And you said, you got kind of number one here, you said there's danger zoners is what you called them. They're content with X. They're content with being in the vulnerable place. I in my mind, I thought submitted. Actually, you wrote resigned. They're resigned to it. And they're there. I don't think many of them are listening to this show because why would they? So let's go next is developmentals is what you call them. They recognize they're stuck, but they don't know what to do about it. I think there's a lot of folks. I would say, again, we're probably all there at some point in some place. So there's some places where I am not. Well, let me go on real quick. Then you go to trainees. Number 3 is trainees. They're ready. They're going to make it happen. And then you've got number 4, experienced operators. They get off the X always. Again, I'd go back to that spectrum. If we look at like the wheel of life kind of thing, like the Ziegler wheel of life, I use that a lot. And look at that. I'd say in some of those areas, man, I am an experienced operative. In others, I'm a trainee. I hope I'm not a danger zoner anywhere. I don't want to admit to that one. I'm not admitting that on the podcast, but on some I'd say I'm a developmental. I recognize I'm stuck. Don't always know what to do about it. And sometimes that's in regards, at least for a while, to a circumstance. And I go,
Sure.
man, I don't feel super well, like like you said with your guy, I'm not feeling a whole lot of agency here. Now I do in my head, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to
Yeah.
think that I vacillate between these in these certain areas. The one thing that I hit on though, or I came to with developmentals, they recognize that they're stuck, but they don't know what to do about it, is they need someone else's help.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I tell people who have mastered the art of getting off the X that our job is now to help other people recognize when they're stuck.
Yeah.
And helping, I think a little bit of encouragement can go a really long way. I mean, have you ever spoken into someone's life, like you have seen a person and they are very gifted in a particular area, and you think it's so obvious they're so gifted at this thing, and you compliment them and you say, wow, you know what? You are really good at that. And I've had them look at me like, really? And I'm like, do you not know this? And they're like, no. And so even in pointing out someone's giftings, you might be telling them something you think is obvious, but no one's ever said to them. That could be the impetus they need to push themselves forward in some area of their life. So there's a lot that we can do, those of us who are more proficient at this, and kind of gathering the troops and being like, you know what, I know it's hard, and there's going to be 1,000 obstacles between you and your path or the door you're meant to walk through, but you're going to bust through them. So, because that's the next part of the book, like I think that the younger generation is being fed a diet of, if it hurts or it's hard, quit. So we have a generation that doesn't understand the value of perseverance and grit. And so what I'm trying to say is, actually, life is so challenging. You are going to have obstacles left and right. So they might as well be obstacles in the movement versus obstacles because you're sitting and doing nothing and, life just happens. So at least get moving and realize the obstacles are going to come, because I've had 20-year-olds, because I mentor a lot of young people, tell me, oh, but this happened and that happened. I'm like, yeah, that stuff happens. And then you got to figure out a way through, around this obstacle. It's interesting because they think obstacle means stop, turn around and quit, or quit. I'm like, guys, no. It is never easy. Even when you are on the perfect right path, it's going to be hard.
Okay, well, let's look then at part 2 of your book, Denial and Deception. And you go through these 4, or you list out 4 things: intimidation, uncertainty, fear, and circumstances. And I'm going to say, challenging circumstances. So if anyone hears this show and goes to apply at the CIA, I think you would be saying, well, that's right off the bat. And you said that. Can you handle stress? Can you handle, let's go through this. Intimidation, you're going to be intimidated. Uncertainty, there's going to be a lot. Fear, it's going to happen. And hard circumstances. So they're coming to the CIA. I think they would be prone to go, well, sure. Okay, well, how about if they're going to get a job at Google? I don't know, or an architecture firm. Why not take that same aspect in there? Because I think it's probably going to happen. If my kids, what field are they going to go into that there's not going to be an aspect where they're going to be intimidated at some point, where they're going to have uncertainty, where they're going to have fear and challenging circumstances. So if we just expect that, I like that. Let's just expect it, not pessimistically, but I guess optimistically, but that it's going to happen. It's not going to be, expect the obstacle. Fair? Is that what you're saying?
Expected. I mean, even for me getting into the CIA, so my first book is a lot more CIA focused, like how did we get in and what was that career like? I mean, Kevin, I got hired by the CIA and then I got fired by the CIA. So I didn't even actually get into the front door. I got through the side door. I originally was hired to be an analyst, which would have kept me in the DC area. But you don't know it. I mean, going into this, you don't know anything about the CIA. So they go, we want you to be an analyst. And you go, great. You don't know any better. But then I graduated Georgetown. I was about to start this amazing new CIA career. And then I get this letter in the mail that says, you no longer meet the qualifications for this position. And I was like, what? So I was like the first person in my class to get this job offer. And then it turns out that I was the last person in my class without a job after graduation.
Wow.
And what I didn't know at the time, I later learned, was that they have to overhire. So if they've got 2 positions, they'll hire 5 people. Not all of them will get through the background investigation and all of that stuff. Well, I didn't know that because I'd done so much international travel. Mine took longer. Anyway, so I got accepted and rejected by the CIA. And if you had said, if I had the mindset, well, and that's it, no CIA for me, then boy, would my life have been different. But what ended up happening was Joseph and I, my husband, learned about this other side of the CIA that was in the field, not analysis, but actually operations. And so what happened was we ended up applying to this other side of the CIA and getting in that door. And it turns out, sometimes rejections are a blessing because you weren't meant to go in that direction.
Yeah.
If I had gotten that first job in the CIA, I would have been an analyst. I would have been based out of DC, and I wouldn't have done all this field work. So the lesson for that for me was like if you think things are going to be easy, that's just not life. It's going to be hard. And so even for me, getting into the CIA was difficult.
Okay, so on this one, I think where I keyed in the most was on your discussion about just uncertainty.
Yeah.
I think that's what hit me. Again, we look, and I'm keying in off what you said with kind of the younger generation today doesn't seem to be as willing to take risks, to do something that's challenging. And that aspect of uncertainty, it's just where I'm studying right now, that we seem to be a culture so focused on striving for certainty, which I don't think we can have. I mean, we were talking here about, perspective and what's perspective and what's fact. I think, man, I find less and less fact anywhere with anything. And yet we speak with certain terms. We use objective vernacular even, and we speak at this is, it is, they are, I am, all these things that I'm I'm learning they're objective. And I've done this too. We want black and white. We want right and wrong. Let's just let's put the rules down. We don't have to think about it. Wouldn't it? But then it's not. And yet I'm looking at going, okay, well, it's if I can be comfortable in the uncertainty, this was your job. Can you be comfortable or at least familiar with intimidation, with uncertainty, with fear, with circumstances? I feel like, man, that's the security. That's the opportunity right there. If I can be okay with that, then I can get off the X. Otherwise, all those things are going to keep me in it forever.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And, a lot of people are, so fascinated by the CIA, and I totally understand why, because it's shrouded in secrecy. And it's a sexy thing, right? So a lot of people want to apply to the agency and they want to get in. And I say, okay, do you realize that when you're in the CIA and you're going to be a field operative, you don't know where you're going to be in a year. And you're at the government's beck and call. So if they say, I need you in 2 weeks in a different country, then you have to pack up all of your household and move to another country. We were yanked around so many times by the government. So, I mean, and talk about getting like whiplash from getting yanked around. We spent 2 really hard years in our first tour, which was extremely dangerous place, which at that time wasn't technically a war zone, but it certainly is now. 2 long years in this place. And then we finally got like this lovely location in the Middle East that people were always so happy to get. And we were there for 5 months before we were told, you're getting surged to Baghdad for a year during the worst part of the war, when it was all like death and destruction and sectarian cleansing. And I could not think of a worse place to be. On my list of all the places I could serve, Iraq would have been at the bottom. And then suddenly I'm like, wait a minute, we just got to our new posting and we've only been here for 5 months. I just got my household items 2 months ago. And then they go, well, you got to go. And the next thing you know, you're packing out your household. So what I'm trying to get people to understand is even when you do cool things and sexy things and interesting things that make the headlines, what your life is like on a daily basis requires such grit, requires such perseverance, requires flexibility, and requires this enormous amount ability to deal with uncertainty of the direction of your own life, where you're going to live in a year, like who you're going to work with. So next thing you know, you're dropped into a new country. You have, so it's a new country, new culture, new home, new boss, new staff around you. I mean, everything is new.
Yeah.
And how do I get to the grocery store? And how do I get home again? And how do I get the place? Like, so we have to get better at what I'm so glad you brought up the uncertainty thing. We have to get better at living with uncertainty and not knowing what's next. Like that's kind of a requirement of a living an amazing, adventurous, well-lived life.
All your examples right there of just what you went through, I just made a connection with. So a year ago, it's probably been more than a year ago, I had a guy on the show, Don DePani. He's he was a monk. And he's still now like a practicing priest, but he spent, I don't know, a decade as a monk in a monastery.
Wow.
In Hawaii. And, he learns, of course, and I'm badly paraphrasing the details here, but, he learns peace and he learns to be good in solitude and he learns mindfulness and all this kind of stuff. Now, he said this in the book. I read this before I even had him on the show. And he says, so, you could look at that and somebody could go, well, yeah, dude, I bet I could do those things too if I was just taking care of myself in a monastery in Hawaii. You're not married with kids and a job and whatever. And he said, fair enough. And yet when he transitioned to that, which he did, so then he moved to America, I think it was New York, and I can't remember the job, got married, had a kid, and he realized, no, I can apply these principles in this life. And that's what he does today. So he's a big name and, leads a lot of people. I'm thinking, here you are in those hard circumstances in Baghdad, doing this kind of stuff. And that's what you've done then. You've come back into the quote real world, or, not that acute of a situation necessarily, but gone, and those skills and qualities, that's what helps you here. Thank goodness it's not that acute, but that's what we're missing in essence. Fair?
Yeah, that's very fair. Yeah. Good. That's a good way to talk about that for sure.
I do want to hit one thing that just stuck out to me a couple of times, and you hit it in part 3 of your book where it's about tradecraft and you call it an inertia breaker. So we're back to the X of feeling that something's not okay, something's not right. You want to improve something, whatever it is, as everybody's listening right now. Not sure what to do. And you're saying to just make some movement. And you talk about inertia breakers. And I thought about, if you remember, I'm pretty sure it was in this book, Call of the Wild, that old book that I think we all had to read in school or whatever, Call of the Wild. And I always remembered the dog. And it's the first time they put it on the sled. And the dog is put on the sled and, I guess has the idea to move forward, and it can't. And the trainer or the dude, whatever, says, teaches it that first, because the sled, the skis are in the ice. He says, first you got to jerk it one way, then jerk it the other to break it loose from the ice. Then it can go forward. But otherwise, you're not going forward at all. And I love that. And I thought about that when you talked about inertia breakers, that we can get in that place and feel like it's just this monumental effort to go forward. And I'm thinking that I wanted to come up with a great analogy and I didn't in time for myself. But sometimes when it's just do something. Just do something that shows you that you can move. Do something out of the ordinary. Do something different. Is that fair with what you were getting to with inertia breakers?
Oh yeah, because again, it's helping people understand you don't have to find that next perfect move, just any move to break that inertia. So I mean, I'll give two real world examples. If you haven't worked out in a long time, this is probably not an area that you suffer from, but people like us, you're out of your routine of working out, and then it feels like you've got lead on your feet. Like the idea of starting your getting back into your routine feels like, oh my God. And so what I have found is I just tell my husband, I wake up in the morning, I make the decision. I'm like, guess what? I'm going to work out today. And he's like, okay, thanks for telling me. But it's part of how I, register in my brain that there's going to be movement today. And then I tell myself, like, So you walk for half a mile on the treadmill. Like, just do something. And then I get on the treadmill and next thing now I'm running. Because like as soon as you just start walking, then like we say, energy begets energy, and then you've softened the ice and you can finally
Mhm.
move forward. So all you just, you would know this too from writing a book. People ask me all the time, how the heck do you write a book? You haul your butt out of bed every day, you drink your coffee, you sit down at the computer and you start writing. And you don't wait for the inspiration to hit, you literally start writing. And so all I tell people is like, I think that the reason why I have been so successful in life is that I'm just really good at breaking inertia and just doing something every day. Like just something, not the perfect thing, anything.
I think that's why I resonated with it, Michelle. Yeah, I appreciate. I have to do that with myself still. There's things that, man, they may be even. I'm excited about it. It's inspirational, and yet it's still something new, and I can put it off just like anyone, and I'll find something different. Just do something different. I'll go. I live out here in the woods in a national forest in my home. Right now, I'm here. It's usually empty. I do have one kid homesick today, but it should be the perfect place to write. I don't write a whole lot here. I go to friends' cabins. I go to other places that are not very different, but I don't know. It gets the creative juices flowing. What my book, What Drives You? I got the advance, the book deal, whatever, and time went on and time went on. And oh my gosh, I just didn't make it happen. We're finally in Florida on a family vacation. And I realized I've got to do something, and worked it out with my wife. And I just stayed for 2 weeks by myself and did the first manuscript, which was complete trash, but I at least got that far. Got me started. But
Yeah,
I
see?
like that. I like the inertia break. Just do something different seems
Something
so
different.
powerful. So I appreciated you having that.
Yeah, like for me, I where I am right now, it's a shed. It's literally a shed that was made into an office. And there's some weird brain change that happens between when I walk out my kitchen door and I walk in the shed, and then that change of scenery, boom, sit down and you just start writing. It's an interesting phenomenon.
I I like it. I like it. The other part that you had right after Inertia Breakers was the probe. And on that, what I took from that, what I extrapolated, and you tell me if I'm tracking, was again, just kind of trying things and knocking. To me, it was knocking on doors. That was something that came to me. I'm not good, in my past real religious background, it was, wait on the Lord. And I wasn't real good on that. Waiting on the Lord. And I finally realized, okay, I'm gonna wait, but it's an active waiting. I'm gonna kind
Yes,
of knock on doors.
I love that. That's
Okay.
awesome.
Well,
Yes.
but I still have to be careful. It's knock on the doors. Don't beat them down, or don't start. I'll start finagling. I'll start figuring out. And I'll know, for me, the word's finagling. I go, oh, Kevin, you're finagling. Don't just knock. And so is that fair for the probe?
That is so good. And it's just so hard to capture because, yeah, but I love the way you just said that. You're actively knocking on doors, but when they don't immediately open, you're not like trying to beat it down anyway. Like,
Yeah.
so there's this art to when you are active. And of course, you might get to this in your questions, but then there's a part of my book that I get to, and I'm like, and then sometimes you've done everything you can and still nothing happens, and then that moment, that's when you're like, okay, the things have to align. I have now realized in the moments of panic in my life where I've tried 1,000 things, I've done the probe,
Yeah.
I've done the inertia breakers, and still nothing. I now realize that things were about to happen, but they hadn't aligned exactly the way they were supposed to. And so the art of the wait and those painful moments of the in-betweens when nothing is happening. It's interesting. When you move, when you wait.
Yeah. Well, and maybe there's an art to it, and not a science, because I still don't know. I mean, there have been times it reminds me, yeah, of knocking and knocking and knocking, and then I've had a couple of times going, I just let go.
Yeah.
And then something happens. It's the let go. Of course, you want to put that in a formula. So this is what you do: 10 knocks, then you let go. And I haven't found that.
I let me know when you find it because I
Thanks. Yeah. Likewise.
yes, but
Likewise. Well, your next segment on there was power moves. And what I got from that was kind of back to the uncertainty thing. Was the power move is at some point there's a leap of faith, some aspect of a commitment. Doesn't mean I have to risk the farm or, jump off a cliff necessarily, but I don't know. That's the way I thought about it. What about you? But I thought of it. You're asking us for there's a leap of faith.
Yeah, definitely. So you have a dream job and you think that there's no way you could get that dream job, but you apply anyway. Like,
Yeah.
again, what's the harm? What's the risk in making this power move? This big, having some crazy dream, like wanting to write a book and pitching a book. Like, why not make the pitch? Because the worst thing that's going to happen is nothing. But my husband always reminds me, he's like, if there's some dream you have, something that you really, really want to do, don't hold back. Like, we only get one life. Sometimes you got to do the power move. So for me, that was applying to the agency. It was leaving the agency. These big things, trying to get a book deal, writing a book. Those were all power moves that paid off really well for me. And I think people are very surprised. Sometimes those power moves work out. You get your dream job, you get discovered, or whatever happens.
Yeah. Well, I do. I mean, I got to say that it wasn't the normal read. You've got your point that you're making, and then you tell a story, and the story was not the normal story that I'm used to. And I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was more acute aspects, but I think to some degree it helped me embrace them somewhat. Again, I don't want anyone to hear me, and I don't want me to hear me minimizing our circumstances, minimizing our situation, which may not be the same as the life and death situation that's in your book. But I feel like it really exemplified the point well. And from that, to me, I feel like, hey, it's not life or death. I should be a little more, I don't know, brave in that aspect to try this, to do this in that method. But I love the stories. So I'm doing that selfless promotion for the book. The stories were intriguing to me and astounding in some aspects. What's that?
I think we're all probably similar, you and me and your listeners. We're deeply curious people, but also I learn how to do things by watching how other people did it. So I don't know, I'm not one of those people that can hear a concept and apply it. I don't know, my brain doesn't work like that. I can hear a concept, but then I have to see how someone else applies it. And then I go, oh, that's how it works. So because I learned that way, I figure there's got to be a lot of other people who would learn that way. And I was so inspired by so many of those stories. And I would say things like, somebody's going to tell your incredible story. Yeah. And then I realized one day, I could tell that story. But these people, defied circumstances and defied logic and defied, difficulty. And I found such inspiration in that and what they went through. And I hope other people do as well. So it's good to hear from you. Thank you for saying that you enjoyed
I did. It felt inspiring and kind of like, okay, I can do this. Get off the X. And I also just love that term. It's just an easy get off the X. Just go do it. It'd be a good one it'd be a good book for somebody to share with someone else that they're kind of sharing the journey with, so they can you need to get off the X support group.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Get off the X. Okay. Well, let me know and I'll promote it and I'll join that. Michele, just thanks. I was intrigued with the book. I love the topics, and you continue to help me think through these things. And I kind of come away looking at, okay, I'm grateful for where I'm doing well, getting off the X. And I'm thinking about some of the areas where I'm not being so brave, maybe. Yeah. And, I want to be better. So getting off the X. Thank you. Thanks for getting this out. I'm eager to share it with everybody, and I'm mostly grateful to be the student today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I so appreciate it.
Well, thanks for joining us in this conversation. That again is Michele Rigby Assad, and her book that I used as the muse for this discussion, Get Off the X, the CIA Secrets for Conquering Obstacles and Achieving Your Life's Mission. If you want guidance, personal guidance on getting off your X, figuring out what it might even be, I'd be honored to help you find some guidance. You can connect with me at kevinmiller.co or email me, kmiller@kevinmiller.co. Here's to then the evolving you.
Yeah.